So welcome to our Design Advantage customer panel. Already today, we've heard from a number of people who work within design and digital development about their thoughts and the role of design within the business and how Design Advantage can drive tangible results. During this next session, we're going to be focusing on digital transformation in practice. So how are brands having to evolve as a result of the demand for digital transformation? How are they adapting to content creation to keep up with that demand? How is digital content changing the customer experience? How do you then measure the success of customer content consumption? And how important is collaboration and streamlining the creative workflow in order to achieve all of this? So only a couple of things that we're going to cover. So we'll be discussing all of that and a lot more over the next 45 minutes. Our panel members today have a wealth of experience in this area. So first of all, I'm delighted to welcome to the stage Cheyney Robinson for IBM Europe for the Interactive Experience team. So Cheyney, please come out. Thank you. I don't know. Thank you. Do take a seat, Cheyney. Thank you. So Cheyney's team bring together strategy, analytics, design, technology to create engaging customer experiences. She has a wealth of experience in complex business transformation, consumer experiences, and service design. In 2014, Cheyney was selected as one of 12 women to participate in the first See It, Be It initiative at Cannes Lions, which aims to foster female leadership and to address underrepresentation of women in senior creative roles. So thank you, Cheyney, for that. Next up is Mark Keller, who is the Vice President for Technology and a founder of Hogarth Worldwide Limited, part of the WPP Group. Welcome, Mark. Thank you. We're delighted to have Mark here. He has vast experience in large-scale digital content production, management, archive and distribution, a proven track record in the design and implementation of workflow techniques, hardware specifications, system integration, and the physical layout of production environments. Mark has also been a key consultant to many desktop post-production projects, from digital feature film production to long and short-form TV production. No mean feat. Thank you. So our third panelist, let's welcome up George Ioannou, a director at Wipro Digital. Thank you, George. George has a wealth of experience in digital transformation and digital strategy. He has spent the last 2 decades working within digital specializing in e-commerce and online marketing, spanning sectors including retail, media and entertainment, automotive, and financial, with clients ranging from small businesses through to Fortune 100 companies. Thank you very much, George. So last but no means least, I'd like to welcome Scott Castle to the panel. Scott is Adobe's Director of Product Management for Digital Media. Thank you, Scott. Scott has been responsible for driving key product management initiatives across Adobe. I don't know where my tongue's gone. I do apologize. Let's get it back together. Come on. He has been driving key product management initiatives across Adobe, resulting in a successful portfolio of enterprise solutions and services. Thank you, Scott. Welcome, everybody. I'm so delighted you could join us here today. We're now going to take a seat. There we are. There's enough of me talking. So the first thing that we're going to do is to get some ideas and thoughts from all of the members in the panel as to, from your personal perspective, what does digital transformation mean to you? And Scott, can I start with you?
Yeah, absolutely. So for me, and I think for Adobe, digital transformation is all about brands and organizations building a more connected experience with their individual customers. Adobe itself has been through a digital transformation 5 years ago, we were largely a volume licensing shop that sold software to the channel. Now we have a direct relationship with each one of the creatives that we provide software to, and each one of the customers in our market. And that direct relationship is really, for me, what digital transformation is all about.
Thank you, Scott. George, can we get your thoughts?
Hi. Yeah. For me, I think digital transformation is a program of change that enables companies to innovate and be creative outside of the standardized norms. So disruption in their vertical or in their part, but it's about a step change in creativity and innovation for me.
Mark, thank you.
Oh, thanks. So Hogarth makes ads. We're an advertising implementation agency. When it was set up 7 years ago, we thought we'd do something slightly different, and we thought we'd do the various channels of advertising all together. So in those days, it kind of meant broadcast, print, radio, and that sort of thing. And digital was on the side. And in those days, you used to have a separate place to go to do your TV ads, do your print stuff, and everything else. So we decided we'd put all that together and try and combine all those assets to create campaigns in one go. And we also do it globally, so in lots of different languages. What happened with digital, I consider that like the connected world, right? The online stuff, where you can get stuff on demand. That came along and became actually, in some ways, the target destination for all the things that we do, because ultimately, most of the stuff that we create ends up online. And you could say that online actually is a manifestation of all those disciplines together in an interactive environment. So the digital transformation for us was trying to work out how to get those disparate disciplines and those three sort of four established areas to work together to create content that could also be, I hesitate to say repurposed, but certainly used online as well as all the other channels. So that's what we've been working on.
Was that initially driven by sort of advancements in technology and broadband and kind of connectivity and that sort of thing?
Definitely.
And how quickly did you have to respond to
Well, so it's market demand as usual, and clearly the internet's changed hugely over the last 7 years. Bandwidth and the size of screens, which you've seen before, absolutely transformed the environment that you can work within to consume that sort of content. So it's ironic that, a few years ago we had to shrink video down to play it on the internet. Now we actually have to shrink video down to put it on TV, so it has changed a lot.
Absolutely. And Cheyney?
I think of digital transformation more like experience transformation. Mm-hmm. And I think brands are really looking at the strategic role of design.
Yeah.
And I think they're also trying to bridge the online and offline experience for their customers. And so I think a lot of brands are trying to remain competitive and relevant. Yeah. And I think it's really looking at opportunities to create new value, and also attract new audiences for the future, and all the changes that organizations need to make in terms of content creation, and in terms of every organizational process that requires businesses to become less siloed and work more cohesively and coherently across their own organizations.
Yes, absolutely. And can you explain a little bit about what you mean by online and offline experiences and how the two meet?
Sure. I consider myself a customer advocate, and customers have an expectation that your brand or a brand experience will be as good or better than the last one that they saw that they found exceptional. So if they are in a bricks and mortar physical store environment, and then they go online, and if they are wowed in one channel, they have the expectation that there's going to be a coherence between those channels. And so the bridging of the online and offline is not as oblique as online and retail physical space, but it's everything in between, and it's every digital touch point, because we live in a connected world where those lines are blurring.
And those touch points, I would imagine, for all of our company's customers are so important because we have less and less face-to-face now. Scott, could I ask you next, what are you hearing from customers with regards to their concerns and aspirations as well as demands around digital transformation?
The biggest question I get from customers is, how do we affect this change ourselves? Adobe's gone through a transition ourselves, so we can talk about that. But the questions I'm asked all the time by design departments, by marketing departments, by the line of business owners and our customers is, I want to get here. I want to get to that personalized relationship with my customers and that best-of-breed experience. How do I do that? What do I need to buy? What do I need to build? What do I need to change organizationally to make it possible to go through that kind of a change?
Okay, thank you. And Cheyney, I'm going to come back to you. In your experience, what are the biggest challenges currently facing brands when it comes to implementing digital transformation?
Well, in most cases, it requires a whole new way of working, and it requires a new form of collaboration that may necessitate having new areas of expertise, new subject matter experts. If you want to become a content creator and you have not published before, you will have a whole suite of skills that your organization and workflows will need to reflect. So I think the skills gap in terms of identifying who those people are and who those skills, what those skills are. And I also think there's a lot of redundancy when you're doing content creation. I have 21 years in retail, and so I've worked with a lot of fashion and retail brands, and they find themselves shooting photography multiple times. Or if you're creating a magazine experience and then trying to translate that to an app, or long-form copy and short-form copy, really trying to create the efficiencies in the workflow so that we're working efficiently without the redundancy and the additional cost.
And Scott, is that something that you're seeing with demands from Adobe customers as well, the management as well as the workflows?
Yeah, absolutely. It's management of that process and integrating those things together and making it smooth and seamless. That's really the differentiator between success and failure in a transformation.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to come to Mark and George now for this question. Mark, can I ask you first, what's your personal experience as being part of an organization that's gone through digital transformation? And how did you go about addressing the challenges that faced?
Okay, so for us, as focused from our perspective, the transformation for digital for us was to try and get various disciplines to work together. And it's sort of like easy now, but in those days, they literally had completely different workflows. And I think this collaborative nature of working together, like the kitchen table, put your stuff on the kitchen table, sit around it, and build the thing together. Although very fashionable now, and everybody talks about it, 5 or 6 years ago, in a more rigorous, I saw a few charts earlier on, in a more rigorous sort of structure, it's actually quite hard to get people to do this because they're so used to working in one way. And I think one of the ways we did it was to make all the computers the same in production, have the same application stack on all the machines, and connect them all to the same storage. So they could literally access the same work at the same time. So suddenly they went, oh my goodness, I can get that bit of video, and I've got a bit of Photoshop there, and I've got some 3D over there. Maybe they couldn't work them all, but at least they felt like they were part of it.
In your experience, did you have quite a lot of siloed teams within your organization, or was that not so much of a challenge?
We tried not to. So in a version before Hogarth, it was definitely individual companies. And those of you familiar with post-production or any sort of advertising production knows, especially sort of doing a TV commercial, you hop from one shop to another. Or used to, an editor, sound house, 3D house, color grading, finishing, audio. And that we tried to combine into one production pipeline and have similar ones for print and for the other disciplines.
But Hogarth is part of WPP, which is a huge, massive, worldwide group of agencies. Did you have experience of difficulties with sort of location distances and teams working apart, getting content in from other areas of the business?
So you need to invest in some of this. The reality is you need bandwidth, you need speed. If you don't have these things, you can't do this. So, one of the very first things we did was put in a very big global network for moving our stuff around, and also integrate with the creative agencies, because that's where the idea comes. And if the creatives can work more closely with the production people earlier on in the process, then you can form a much better creative idea that has a better chance of surviving the production process and coming out the other end looking something like what they dreamt up in the first place.
Absolutely. We'll come on to the infrastructure a little bit more in some detail later. George, can I ask you the same question, your experience of being part of digital transformation within your own organization or those that you work with?
Okay. For us, it was a little bit of a cheat. We created a digital practice called Wipro Digital. And really, we were trying to enable agility. And one of the things we've come up with that we do for our customers as well is to create cells, digital cells where like you're saying, you enable people to work in collaboration. So you have creatives, engineers, strategists, developers, all sitting as one cell. So then you're able to collaborate quicker and easier. I think that's one of the big problems that out there with digital transformation is that change and the agility to be able to actually move as fast as you want those ideas to move. So sometimes that's an organizational change. And that's the pieces that we really sort of focused on to try and bring digital transformation inside of our company, but also that's one of the things that we look at outside. I think different companies will look at different things. Some will need more emphasis on data, some will need more emphasis on culture, but it's really finding out those areas to allow for collaboration.
Yeah, and how easy did your teams or the teams you work with find it to adapt to these changes?
Probably best for someone else, but for us it was a starting off strategy.
So you had a huge upscaling in your business.
Yep, so we just placed it in strategy. We didn't have the employees at the start, so we've grown from 15 to 800 in a year. So it was really having the strategy in place to then build from. So as David from Coca-Cola said, you take something, you standardize it, and then you scale. So that's what we've done. In terms of change, we didn't have a real organization there to actually change it. We've built from the ground up.
It's a nice, lucky position to be in a way, isn't it? But Mark, how easily did your teams adapt to the changes that you had to implement?
I think generally, once you can explain the concept of what you're trying to achieve, they get it. There is some retraining though, and there is some adjustment of perspective. We have actually something going on in Hogarth called Inky Pixels, which is actually a whole program of getting print operators more digital savvy and more accomplished on working with the web tools rather than the more traditional print tools. Yeah. So you have to work at it.
Because you don't want to lose those skills, do you?
Absolutely
from
not.
one area?
No, there's some fantastic skills there that give a huge amount of production value to a digital production.
Absolutely. So, Cheyney, I'm going to come to you now to talk about the adaptations to content creation that need to be made to meet this sort of demand. Our recent report, The State of Content, reveals that 68% of British public stop engaging with poorly designed content. How do your teams go about creating engaging, standout content in this kind of huge plethora of content that we're receiving and consuming every day?
Yeah. Look, I think it's about storytelling, and it's really about telling a product story or a brand story. And experience transformation is really understanding the potential to bring those stories to life. Yeah. And, experiences don't have to be very elaborate. They just have to connect emotionally or reflect a resonance or empathy for the audience that they're targeting. Yeah. So, I mean, people are consuming, fleeting, momentary Snapchat experiences. It does not have to be epic. It can be just momentary. Yeah.
And how important is the time at which and the kind of the device on which they kind of consume this content? How important is that to the story that you're telling at that time? Is that a consideration?
I think you want to design with an understanding of how someone is going to be digesting that content and their behaviors with that platform or device. Yeah. I don't think it should be driven by the device. I think it should be driven by the story that you want to tell, and really looking for those meaningful intercepts to create a meaningful interaction with the customer.
That point in the journey to meet with them. George, over to you now. Our digital roadblock report found that 48% of UK marketers are concerned about keeping up with the rapidly changing pace in the industry. What are the main challenges facing marketers around digital transformation in the marketing industry from your experience?
Right, big one. I think from a transformation point of view, we're seeing that we want to take it from an outside-in perspective, so looking really at the customer and how they define what they need to do. I think marketeers in the past have really tried to push, we're going to drive customers and behaviors in this direction, and now you typically find actually consumers or customers and clients have that power. So really what you need to do is map yourself and align to those customers. So we've come up with basically a process called customer journey engineering, where we map the the customer's life cycle or their journey and their touch points, and then ensure that we have the business IT processes, the creative content to allow them to get on with their daily tasks. So for them, it's a series of tasks that they need to do, and keeping the content relative and efficient, basically, into where they want to go. So really, it's just switching it from a customer-centric point of view. And I think if you do that and you be truthful to the person that you want on the other end, you can't help but succeed.
And how are developments in technology helping marketers to kind of read their customer experiences and target them better?
In terms of technology, I think there's so much more that marketeers can use now. There's a lot of data out there. I mean, if we take email marketing, for example, it used to be not long ago that you'd send out a blanket email and you would just hope that your click-through rate and your conversion rate or whatever would actually bring on some results. Whereas now it's getting a little more clever with data. You're able to then support that customer's journey and trigger a series of emails through that point of view. So I think marketeers have got data on their side, but at the same time, they have to have an appreciation for technology. So I think that's where we're seeing CMOs having that appreciation and using technology to then drive contextual and personalized messaging throughout. And then there's obviously more technology like beacons and NFC and things like that actually enable marketing. So there's quite a lot of tools out there for marketeers.
And of course, that resonates, Scott, doesn't it, with our solutions within the digital marketing cloud. There's a lot of data out there. It's finding ways to best use that and create campaigns. Yeah,
absolutely. You think about marketing and leveraging analytics. This is all about getting the customer to the right decision point and then making an offer when it's appropriate. So you think about what you can do with analytics and how you can get to, from an introductory state, hello, here's my brand, to I have some engaging content, I have some engaging offers, let me tell you more about it, to, hey, it's the last millisecond, this is the decision for you, and hey, it's 10% off. That's a very compelling way of engaging with customers. It leverages, Cheyney, what you were talking about, storytelling and getting people in. You have to get their engagement in the first place. Once you've got that, you can leverage the data you can collect and the interactivity you can deliver through these connected devices to build upon the story and to deliver that last millisecond experience. And for me, the key part of it that's really important is figuring out how to arrange your creative organization to supply your marketing programs with enough content and the right kind of targeted content to feed all this. You have to tell the story. You have to respond in all these different ways, and you have to preload that mechanism, because you can't come up with this stuff on the fly. Yeah. You have to actually have a campaign that's ready for all the different stages of that customer communication.
And it needs to be reactive and change quickly, right, as well, to changing customers' behavior on the fly, like you say. It needs to be something that we can trigger automatically in a lot of cases as well. Okay, Mark, we're just going to talk a little bit more about the customer experience now. Our recent report, The State of Content, revealed that 85% of people multi-screen or regularly use more than 2 devices at the same time, which results in them being distracted by the influx of content they come across every single day. How do you go about tackling the challenge of creating content for different screens, from the desktop to mobile and everything in between?
Oh, with difficulty.
Yeah.
From our perspective, again, we create marketing communications. So the brands are most interested in consistency of message and also maintain the production value across all these platforms. Okay, so that's pretty hard to do. But everything that's created these days is created with at least one eye on the fact that it's going to end up in a online environment. Okay, so what works in an online environment? So when you start to create the message, you have to make sure that, I mean, it even goes down to basic stuff. If you're talking about selling product, the product is big enough in a shot so that when it gets online, you don't have to crop it too much. The message is still there. As well as making sure that the design is reactive depending upon the screen sizes, which is quite hard when you're selling things, because the brand always wants their brand really big. The creative always wants, the creative environment to tell the story. So you always got that tussle going on.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. And there's actually issues around creating all of these reversioned sizes of video content images just alone, isn't there?
That's right. So I mean, I think again, it sort of goes down to the technical infrastructure a bit, but having all your stuff accessible in a central place and properly curated so people can pull the correct master element in order to do the reversioning is important. And we do, I mean, most ads that we do probably go out in about 30 different languages, not to mention all different screen sizes. And if you look at the TV formats and the actual device formats, there's a lot of different versions there. So you really need to have stuff centrally accessible and centrally managed, because otherwise you end up with versions scattered all over the world and nobody knows, which one is the right one to work.
Sure. George and Cheyney, I'm going to open the next 2 questions up to both of you. Please answer at will. Are there certain types of content that you would say work best for different devices? And how do you make a call as to what you push out there? Who would like that one?
You first?
George, should we
So for me, the type of content is really, again, mapping into the customer journey and what they're actually doing on that touch point. So we try to have a look at, right, where are they, when they're going to consume this piece of content, and what they're going to do. And again, with technology and data on our side nowadays, I'm a big fan of A/B and multivariate testing, shooting out a few different media or content, and actually then using the data to let us know what sort of content. There's some great tests out there that we've been doing, and I think some of it can be quite surprising, but really it's about keeping it simple, remembering that the customer or that the consumer has a task, and then providing that content. Exactly like what Mark was saying, you keep a content repository of various types of media, various content, and just keeping it in mind. But obviously, I think one of the key things is when you're doing content for mobile, don't use a large format graphic and expect someone to read it on a mobile device. Adjust your content to your device accordingly.
There's got to be some optimization in there as well as thinking about the story you're telling.
And we tend to use multivariate testing to optimize that side.
I think ideas are platform agnostic. Right. I really think it's about understanding the story that you want to tell. And I think the challenge for brands is you're not in charge of only being the sole way that your brand is conveyed. Look at your social channels and you will understand how customers are behaving and interacting with your brand. And I think the more sophisticated brands are thinking about leaving a space for customers to actually be part of the story, their brand story or their product story. And so I think, if you look at how different psychographics, demographics are actually consuming content, and then you go to where your audience is, there may be rich territory in terms of not just putting content out into the world, but also having user-generated content and having a conversation with your customers. Because communications are one piece of the puzzle. Marketing is one piece of the puzzle, but the social commentary is also another. And so I think that is another component of content that is really important to include in this discussion.
So with the customer, sorry, Scott, please.
No, I was going to say, Cheyney, I think you're raising a really interesting point. I think it's actually less and less about the device and the form factor, and it's more about the communication channel that you're in. So the brands that I work with, I see them doing totally different content for Vine than they would for Facebook, different from Snapchat, different from traditional web advertising, totally different from broadcast TV. And it's that personalization of the content to the channel that I think is actually far more relevant than the size of the glass you're looking at.
Yeah,
absolutely.
That's brought me on so nicely, because the next question is about personalization of content and how, now that we have these audiences and we have this interactivity with them and we have them kind of on display for us in many ways on these social platforms, how do you go about personalizing that content, and how important is that for brands to do?
Well, it's funny. I mean, with technology enablement, one might think that it would free you to have more human interaction and human contact, but it's super important. I think there's explicit behaviors that a customer can tell you what they're shopping, where they're dwelling, what they're looking at. You can instrument this in the physical environment, and you can absolutely measure this in the digital environment online as well. I think, particularly in retail, I think it's very interesting to actually use those as inputs into CRM programs so that you actually can have much more targeting when you know what brands your customer is attracted to or affiliated with. what the tastemakers are of their age, their demographic, their psychographic. You can make more informed suggestions to them.
I wonder if there is a line and where you see that line, and if it's something that you're all sort of conscious of. Is there that point where the customer starts to feel recognized and valued, that you know what it is they're interested in and what they're doing, as opposed to starting to be spied on, and where did you get this information about me, and how do you know I just looked at that on another website, and that sort of, that sort of thing? Whereabouts are we in that space?
I think the intercepts have to be relevant, and I think they have to be an additional level of information that is welcomed.
Yeah.
I think anything that is perceived as creepy is not cool. That's kind of basic, right?
Except on Halloween, maybe.
Yeah, it's cool creepy.
How about from your perspective? So is that something that's kind of in your customer's mindset at the moment, or?
I can only go from demand. So
Yeah.
we're being asked by the brands to be more responsive, to
Yeah.
create marketing material much more quickly, and actually not to load up a campaign, for 3 months with stuff and just release it over time because of the analytics, because they may not have got it right at the beginning, or they may find something else is trending they didn't see. So the question is, well, how do you do this? How do you make a TV ad in a week rather than a month? Or even worse, how do you change all the web content in a day or less than that?
Yeah.
So that's definitely a demand that's been placed on us to do, and we put several measures in place to try and support that. And one of them is ways of spinning up microsites really quickly, like in minutes, that have stuff on it that's new and unique, that can then be stripped down and rebuilt into something else without costing an absolute fortune.
Yeah, yeah. And Scott, I'd just like to come to you now. I mean, in what way are customers kind of demanding help from Adobe in terms of meeting all of this extra personalized?
Yeah, they're asking in a couple of different ways. One way is they're looking for advice, and our global solutions folks can help them guide through this kind of transformation. The other way that Adobe is seen as someone to go to is as a technology vendor. So things like personalization through technologies like AEM and Scene 7, spinning up microsites, customizing content for email blasts. Finding ways to do that is sort of top of mind for our customers. And the questions that I get asked most often is, how do I incorporate the technology you have on offer into these sort of campaigns to get to this level of personalization?
Okay, great stuff. Thank you. Cheyney, back to you again. How important is beautiful design to the effectiveness of the content, and how do you measure that success? This is the design advantage forum, so we have to address design heavily.
Yes, I think campaigns and experiences should be exceptional and should be beautiful, but they must be measured. They need to convert, design is not a charity. We are in the business of design, and so it should be measured, and it needs to perform, and it needs to be effective. So I think that experiences should be on brand, and they should be utilizing the best means to tell a story in a very immersive way, but they must be effective.
Yeah. And what types of content are customers engaging with effectively at the moment? Anybody on the panel can take this one.
Loads more video.
Give us loads more video.
Yeah.
Video everywhere.
Loads more video.
Yeah. George?
Yeah.
No, I was just going to say, it really depends on their task and what they're doing. Sometimes you're saying a video would be much easier to consume than a specification sheet, for example. So you start to see a lot of actually the startups are using video to actually put over their pitch, their elevator pitch in a video form.
Yeah.
But it really is about making that task for that user as simple as possible. So if you take that customer-centric point of view and say, how do I get them from A to wanting to do B, and then you map that to the piece of content or the medium, you can't go wrong.
Scott, sorry, were you about to?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. So I think video, Mark, that you brought up is really interesting. Video is one of the most expensive formats traditionally to produce for. It's a longer tail, it's more infrastructure, it's $100,000 cameras, but that was yesterday. Today, Facebook and Snapchat both hit 4 billion daily views for videos, and Vine hit 15 billion dailies. We also know that from ComScore that about 192 million people watch short-form video daily, and 92% of those people reshare content on social networks. So video is sort of the new way of communicating a story. And fortunately, the cost of production for short-form video is minuscule compared to what it was even just a couple of years ago. A video that's 15 or 30 seconds long costs almost nothing to produce. The hardware is off the shelf. The software is off the shelf. And more, I actually see marketers getting directly involved in cutting these videos together. You capture a video from social, or you capture video with a small device, cut it together not in an edit bay, but in a marketing suite, and you push it out.
Mark, could I ask you this question? And obviously, we see a lot of user-generated content online now.
Yeah.
Production values are very different with
Yes.
lots of different video out there. Within Hogarth, have you kind of altered your production standard values for some of the content that you produce to
Well,
reflect
some of our customers like the immediacy
Yeah.
style, should
Yeah,
I say, right?
exactly.
So you can get away with a lot.
Yeah.
Because it's supposed to look like.
But I mean, rather, it's not so
No, I
like
get the
dropping
point.
standards, it's like
So,
the...
no, I completely get the point. So it's actually quite tricky. In order to, and I have been accused of productionizing post-production or,
Yeah.
commoditizing it sometimes. But actually, I relate it more to, say, a car, right? Rolls-Royces used to be handmade, and they were beautiful, but each one was basically different.
Yeah.
And unique. And although they were quite reliable, handmade cars generally are not. Whereas if you look at a Merc or a BMW or something like that, it's made on a production line. It's still a masterpiece when it comes off the end, but it's more repeatable, it's more consistent, it's more reliable.
Yeah.
So we've tried to apply that process within our business to try and produce some consistency and standard, but allow people then the ability to do stuff quickly and more immediate to when the idea was generated. So to allow creatives to play in an LE, in an editing application, to make changes and try stuff, but to preserve that information at that time, the look and the feel they might have got, albeit perhaps slightly rough, and then pass that down the production process so a craft editor can get hold of that and improve it a bit, or just maybe get the standards up a bit, or get it legal, or whatever it happens to be able to then deliver that quickly while preserving the initial idea is really what we're working really hard to do all the time. It's critical.
And can you give us some insights from Hogarth's point of view, or indeed from the wider WPP organisation, with regards to the infrastructure that's required?
Sure. Well, there's a few things. One is the $100,000 cameras, or at least the super high-res cameras. A few years ago, we started pulling stills off those cameras and using it in print. Okay? I'm not joking, on purpose, right? So they'd have the set up with product, with actors, with everything else going on, and I think the Red came out as that sort of period of time, and we would purposefully film the TV commercial and the stills effectively at the same time. So that allowed us to get that going. Now, clearly, those are really, really big bits of footage. So what are you going to do with that? I mean, if you go, in the old days, people used to turn up with lots of tape or film cans or whatever. Now they just turn up with tons of FireWire drives that they've got from set. And they're panicking because that's the stuff, and they want to make sure it's someplace safe. So you need, obviously, a lot of storage, a lot of disk. You need to preserve the original image, at least for a period of time. It's funny that there's so much stuff filmed in 4K these days and very rarely shown in 4K, except maybe in a super luxe edit suite. But you still need to preserve that content because the information is there for a period of time. So the real trick is, how do you keep that content, because moving it around is really expensive, copying it is really expensive. So how do you keep that preserved in one place, access proxies of that perhaps, lower res versions of it, while your edit can be moved around, maybe globally, and maintain the connection between all of that. And so we put in a lot of high-speed networks. We have production facilities in the creative agencies, so they can start the work there. But we can centrally digitize all the assets into some large data stores around the world and keep them protected.
And I know you're working, looking at Adobe Anywhere as a solution for...
So we've used Anywhere here and there. That's almost a, And it's a great technology. It does rely on a lot of bandwidth, right? But we have used it, from London to Bucharest in HD. It does definitely work. But I think the idea is to try and disconnect the edit or the metadata, descriptive of the work, away from the content, abstract it a bit, and manage those things slightly separately.
Yeah,
I think Creative
absolutely.
Cloud is probably where the metadata will live.
Yeah.
And I think probably in the larger businesses, their internal infrastructure will have to manage the content.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
Great stuff, thank you. Scott, what would you say are the main challenges for brands that are streamlining workflows at the moment and working across these huge distances, not just with video, but with other content, and also collaborating with other teams externally to their organization even?
I think you've called it right there. It's collaborating across organizational boundaries. I don't know who else in this room has this problem, but in a lot of organizations, marketing and creative and line of business are separate silos. And it's hard to get creatives out of that box. It's hard to get marketers out of that box. And so getting workflows that cross that, which you have to get to this level of velocity, is challenging. Organizations buy differently, they deploy differently, they have different standards, they have different understandings. And breaking down those barriers and coming up with workflows and solutions that connect the organization is, frankly, I think, the biggest challenge in front of us.
Yes, absolutely. And Cheyney, you mentioned that teams and organizations that you work with are having to kind of look at changing the mix of the skills within their organizations. What other challenges are they having to meet in order to kind of deliver the content to their hungry customers who are just sucking it up from all the platforms and devices that are available?
Well, I think it's a changing landscape, and I think, I was on an awards jury over the summer, and it was interesting because pure play digital agencies were not necessarily all of the award winners. It was a lot of advertising agencies that really have, I think, figured out how to crack digital, and everyone is doing experience, and everything is called experience.
Yeah.
But I think it's really understanding that expectations of customers are changing, and they want more real-world experiences that are blending digital and physical. I mean, some of the most exciting experiences that I saw had a product design component as well as a reactive physical environment.
Yeah.
And I think brands, will need a diverse set of creatives that are coming from product, from service design, from experience design, as well as traditional brand, to remain relevant, to create these exceptional experiences, because, again, the experiences are becoming much more robust and are not reliant upon the same set of skills that were reflected in traditional advertising, or even interactive, as archaic a term as that is anymore.
Thank you very much. So I'd just like to round up. We've just got a couple of minutes left. I'd just like to round up now. Cheyney and George, would you please give us, let's start with George, some advice to brands who are looking to evolve and adapt to digital transformation workflows?
I think number one thing is to ensure that you have the agility in your company to be able to do that. That from the top down, that you have the buy-in from the executives to allow for changes. Transformative state does actually mean you're going to change something in the organization. So there's times when people are after digital transformation, but they aren't willing to do the culture, the data, the technology pieces. So I think number one, ensure that you place your company in an area that you're able to make those changes, and then again look from the outside in, and not be so siloed. So try and see what it is that you're trying to change, and get that from the customer point of view or the client point of view, depending on your business, and map it that way, and then allow technology to be the enabler, rather than saying this is what I need to go and buy, a technology or something like that, and actually say, right, how do I get this to go from A to B? Work not in silos, but with creatives, marketeers, strategists, and actually together you get a really good sort of framework for digital transformation.
So you're not starting with technology systems
Exactly.
first primarily. That's so important, isn't it? Can we get some advice from you, please, Cheyney?
Sure. Again, I would support you, George, on that. It's not thinking technology first. I think experience first. What are the brand experiences that you want your customers, your audience to have? what transformation of their customer experience do you want them to have? What behaviors do you want them to change or to take up? And I really would challenge brands that it's not about screens. It's really about telling a brand story, telling a product story, and it's an opportunity for engagement.
Yeah.
And so in this challenge of experience transformation, think about the experiences that you want your customers to have today, tomorrow, and into the near future, and bring on the opportunity, but also understand that it may have some implications around change management,
Yeah.
workflow, as well as the skill sets of your population that's actually going to be bringing these experiences to life.
Yeah, absolutely. And Scott, we work a lot with enterprise customers, don't we, to enable some of these transformations. What do you see as the biggest hurdles for these organizations at the moment?
Yep, I think it's understanding and communicating the business case. This is one of the things that I think escapes us often as creatives or as technologists is how do we communicate to the line of business why it should run the risk and go through the effort of a transformation. I'll say that Adobe can certainly help you with that, but however you make the case, it's going to come down to how is this going to transform my business? And so focusing on how to express that across the organization is probably the best way to successfully defend and to make progress in this kind of a change.
And Mark, for you as well, where are the hurdles and how do they overcome them?
So, quite right, it needs to be a business case. The business has got to decide to work in this modern, collaborative, cloud-based way, and technology should support that somehow,
Yeah.
right? But actually, technology's got to get on board with this as well. Technology's got to be comfortable with allowing people to work in that environment. And it's a real big problem because cloud and born in the cloud and BYOD and cloud logins and having all your metadata, security and compliance and technology guys freak out when you start talking about that. So unless you're really on board with them, they need to get on board to provide the infrastructure to allow it to work like that.
Yeah. You finished bang on zero on
red.
our transaction. Amazing. Listen, thank you so much, guys, all of you on the panel, and a massive thank you for all of your time and your contributions to the day interactively and through the conversations that I used interactive. I shouldn't have done that. Through our conversations that we've had with you. Massive thank you, and I'll hand back over to Mark.